to have targeted over 100 military sites and nuclear facilities, including the Kermanshah missile base, the Natanz and Isfahan nuclear facilities, and the Kondab, former Iraq, heavy water reactor. At the same time, government buildings, homes, and residential neighborhoods, factories, hospitals, airports, and refineries have been stuck in and around Tehran, Isfahan, Tabriz, Avaz, and among many other cities. The bombing on 17 June of Iran's state-run television channel during a live broadcast marked a chilling moment. Residents of Tehran and other cities have received warnings to evacuate on more than one occasion. Iran has closed its airspace until further notice and has shut some border crossings. In Israel, residential neighborhoods and essential infrastructure have been hit throughout the country, notably in Tel Aviv, Haifa, Bat Yam, Dimona, Petah Tikva, and Eilat. Several civilian sites have been directly impacted by Iran's airstrikes, including the Weizmann Research Institute in Rehovot, the Bazan Petrochemical Complex in Haifa, and yesterday, the Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba. A state of national emergency remains in place, with severe restrictions on air travel. Several areas in the occupied West Bank have also been impacted, and checkpoints and road closures are impacting movement, especially for Palestinians. Throughout the region, airspace remains severely constrained by these exchanges, not only within Iran and Israel, but also throughout Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and beyond. The intensifying cycle of attacks and counterattacks has resulted in hundreds of civilian casualties, including fatalities in both Iran and Israel. According to Iran's Ministry of Health, as of 19 June, 224 people had been killed and more than 2,500 others injured in Israeli strikes across Iran. The Health Ministry added that 90% of the victims were civilians. Other estimates, based on local non-governmental organizations and human rights groups, suggest the death toll is at least double the official figure. In addition, there have been over 20 high-ranking Iranian military leaders killed, notably the Commander and Chief of Staff of the Iranian Armed Forces, the IRGC Commander-in-Chief, and IRGC Intelligence Chief, as well as several nuclear scientists. We've also received reports of significant displacement out of Tehran, a city of over 12 million residents, resulting in massive traffic jams. Fuel shortages are leading to long queues at patrol stations, sometimes for over 5 hours, further hampering movement. And still, many remain trapped in their homes in Tehran with nowhere to flee. In the absence of bomb shelters on air raid sirens in the city and widespread internet blackouts, further strikes are bound to harm more civilians. In Israel, the Office of the Prime Minister stated that, as of 19 June, Iran's strikes have killed 24 people and injured 915 others, the vast majority civilians. The strikes have also damaged homes, leading to the displacement of Israelis. Madam President, we are teetering on the edge of a full-blown conflict and a humanitarian crisis. International humanitarian law must be respected, including the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution in attack. Attacks directed against civilians and civilian objects and indiscriminate attacks are strictly prohibited. Medical personnel and medical facilities, including hospitals, must be respected and protected. We are witnessing in real time the impact of the conflict regionally, with missile launches by the Houthis in Yemen toward Israel and heightened tensions involving armed groups in Iraq. With each passing day of fighting, the danger, particularly for civilians, grows. Interceptions and explosives falling short have been reported over Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Syria, sending debris into populated areas sowing fear and uncertainty. Any further expansion of the conflict could have enormous consequences for the region and for international peace and security at large. The fallout of the conflict is also economic. We cannot discount the global impact of a potential disruption of trade through the Strait of Hormuz, described by the World Bank as the world's most critical oil passageway. Trade through this vital route has already fallen by 15% amid heightened tensions starting in late 2023. Madam President, International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Grossi will address this council shortly. Allow me at this juncture to express our appreciation to the IAEA and its staff still on the ground in Iran. We also convey our deepest gratitude to our colleagues who have continued to stay and deliver. At the center of the ongoing conflict are concerns about Iran's nuclear program. As the Secretary General has stated, the best way to address these concerns is through dialogue leading to a negotiated solution. But the window to prevent a catastrophic escalation and achieve a peaceful resolution has not yet closed, as demonstrated by positive recent openings for diplomacy. We welcome in this regard the talks between the foreign ministers of France, Germany, the United Kingdom, and Iran in Geneva today. We strongly encourage such efforts. We must pursue every possible opportunity to de-escalate, to cease the hostilities, to settle disputes by peaceful means. The charter that binds all of us mandates it. The imperative for diplomacy has seldom been greater. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing, and I now give the floor to Mr. Rafael Mariano Grossi.
Thank you very much, Madam President, dear Secretary General, dear Madam Under-Secretary General, dear friends. Attacks on nuclear sites in the Islamic Republic of Iran have caused a sharp degradation in nuclear safety and security in Iran, though they have not so far led to a radiological release affecting the public. There is a danger this could occur. The IAEA has been monitoring closely the situation at Iran's nuclear sites since Israel began its attacks a week ago. As part of its mission, the IAEA is the global nerve center for information on nuclear and radiological safety, and we can respond to any nuclear or radiological emergency. Based on information available to the IAEA, the following is the current situation at Iran's nuclear sites, which I offer as a follow-up to my most recent report to this Security Council. The Natanz enrichment site contains two facilities. The first is the main fuel enrichment plant. The initial attacks on the 13th of June targeted and destroyed electricity infrastructure at the facility, including an electrical substation, the main electric power supply building, an emergency power supply, and backup generators. On the same day, the main cascade hall appears to have been attacked using ground-penetrating munitions. Second facility at Natanz is the pilot fuel enrichment plant. It consists of above-ground and underground cascade halls. On the 13th of June, the above-ground part was functionally destroyed, and the strikes on the underground cascade halls were seriously damaging. The level of radioactivity outside the Natanz site has remained unchanged and at normal levels, indicating no external radiological impact on the population or the environment there. However, within the Natanz facility, there is both radiological and chemical contamination. It is possible that uranium isotopes contained in uranium hexafluoride, uranyl fluoride, and hydrogen fluoride are dispersed inside the facility. The radiation, primarily consisting of alpha particles, poses a significant danger if inhaled or digested. This risk can be effectively managed with appropriate protective measures, such as using respiratory devices. The main concern inside the facility is chemical toxicity. Fordow is Iran's main enrichment location for enriching uranium at 60%. The agency is not aware of any damage at Fordow at this time. At the Esfahan nuclear site, 4 buildings were damaged in last Friday's attack: the Central Chemical Laboratory, a uranium conversion plant, the Tehran reactor fuel manufacturing plant, and the enriched uranium metal processing facility, which was under construction. No increase of off-site radiation levels was reported. In Natanz, the main concern here is chemical toxicity. The Kondab heavy water research reactor under construction in Arak was hit on the 19th of June. As the reactor was not operational and it did not contain any nuclear material, no radiological consequence is expected. The nearby heavy water production plant is also assessed to have been hit. And similarly, no radiological consequence is expected. As stated in the IEA's update of 18th June, at the Tehran Research Center, 1 building where advanced centrifuge rotors were manufactured and tested was hit. At the Karaj workshop, 2 buildings where different centrifuge components were manufactured were destroyed. There was no radiological impact internally or externally. Let me now refer to the Bushehr nuclear power plant. This is the nuclear site in Iran where the consequences of an attack could be most serious. It is an operating nuclear power plant, and as such, it hosts thousands of kilograms of nuclear material. Countries of the region have reached out directly to me over the past few hours to express their concerns, and I want to make it absolutely and completely clear. In case of an attack on the Bushehr nuclear power plant, a direct hit would result in a very high release of radioactivity to the environment. Similarly, a hit that disabled the only 2 lines supplying electrical power to the plant could cause its reactor's core to melt, which could result in a high release of radioactivity to the environment. In the worst case, both scenarios would necessitate protective actions, such as evacuations and sheltering of the population, or the need to take stable iodine with a reach extending to distances from a few to several hundred kilometers. Radiation monitoring would need to cover distances of several hundred kilometers, and food restrictions may need to be implemented. Any action against the Tehran nuclear research reactor could also have severe consequences, potentially for large areas of the city of Tehran and its inhabitants. In such a case, protective actions would need to be taken. I continue to provide public updates about the developments at all these sites and their possible health and environmental consequences. The agency is, as Madam Undersecretary have kindly reminded, is and will remain present in Iran, and inspections there will resume as required by Iran's safeguards obligations under its NPT safeguards agreement as soon as safety and security conditions allow. In this context, let me restate that the safety of our inspectors is of utmost importance. The host country has a responsibility in this regard, and we expect every effort to be made to ensure that their security and their communication lines with the IAEA headquarters will be maintained. As stated in my most recent report to the agency's Board of Governors and based on inspections conducted at the relevant facilities since then, Iran's uranium stockpiles remain under safeguards in accordance with Iran's Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. You may recall that more than 400 kilograms of this stockpile is uranium enriched up to 60% of uranium-235. It is essential that the agency resumes inspections as soon as possible to provide credible assurances that none of it has been diverted. Importantly, any special measures by Iran to protect its nuclear material and equipment must be done in accordance with Iran's safeguards obligation and the agency. Therefore, it is of paramount importance that the agency's inspectors are allowed to verify that all relevant materials, especially those enriched to 60%, are accounted for. Beyond the potential radiological risks, attacks on such materials would make this effort, of course, more difficult. Madam President, the IAEA has consistently underlined, as stated in its General Conference resolutions, that armed attacks on nuclear facilities should never take place and could result in radioactive releases with grave consequences within and beyond the boundaries of the state which has been attacked. I therefore, again, call on maximum restraint. Military escalation threatens lives and delays indispensable work towards a diplomatic solution for the long-term assurance that Iran does not acquire a nuclear weapon. Madam President, the presence, support, analysis and inspections of technical experts are crucial to mitigating risks to nuclear safety and security. That is true during peacetime and even more so during military conflict. For the second time in 3 years, we are witnessing a dramatic conflict between two UN and IAEA member states in which nuclear installations are coming under fire and nuclear safety is being compromised. The IAEA, just as has been the case with the military conflict between the Russian Federation and Ukraine, will not stand idle during this conflict. As I stated in this chamber just a few days ago, I am ready to travel immediately and to engage with all relevant parties to help ensure the protection of nuclear facilities and the continued peaceful use of nuclear technology in accordance with the agency mandate, including by deploying agency nuclear safety and security experts, in addition to our safeguards inspectors in Iran, wherever necessary. For the IAEA to act, a constructive professional dialogue is needed. I urge the members of this council to support us in making it happen sooner rather than later. The IAEA must receive timely and regular technical information about affected nuclear facilities and their respective sites. I urge in this regard the Iranian regulatory authorities to continue a constructive dialogue with the IAEA Incident and Emergency Center, which has been operating 24/7 since the beginning of this conflict. Nuclear facilities and material must not be shrouded by the fog of war. Yesterday, there was an incorrect statement to the media by an Israeli military official that the Bushehr nuclear power plant had been attacked. Though the mistake was quickly identified and the statement retracted, the situation underscored the vital need for clear and accurate communication, and the agency's unique role in providing it in a technically accurate and politically impartial way is obvious. Let me conclude by assuring the international community of the IAEA's continued support at this very grave time. A diplomatic solution is within reach if the necessary political will is there. Elements for an agreement have been discussed. The IAEA can guarantee through a watertight inspection system that nuclear weapons will not be developed in Iran. They can form the basis of a long-standing agreement that brings peace and avoids a nuclear crisis in the Middle East. This opportunity should not be missed. The alternative would be a protracted conflict and a looming threat of nuclear proliferation that, while emanating from the Middle East, would effectively erode the NPT and the non-proliferation regime as a whole. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Grossi for his briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. President, I thank you for convening this emergency open meeting. I thank Secretary General Guterres for his statement and support his call for an end to the fighting and the return to diplomatic negotiations. I thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo and Director General Grossi for their briefings. As the Israel-Iran military conflict enters its 8th day, it is distressing to note that it has resulted in a large number of civilian casualties and damage to facilities on both sides. If the conflict escalates further, not only will both sides suffer greater losses, but the regional countries will also be severely affected. Israel's actions violate international law and the norms of international relations, jeopardize sovereignty and security of Iran, and undermine regional peace and stability. China unequivocally condemns this. Chinese President Xi Jinping has put forward a 4-point proposal regarding the current situation. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has spoken separately with his counterparts of Iran, Israel, and the regional countries. At this critical juncture, the international community should further forge a consensus and make every effort to promote talks to ease tension. I will make 4 points. First, there must be an immediate ceasefire and an end to fighting. The use of force is not the right way to resolve international disputes. It will only exacerbate hatred and conflicts. The sooner a ceasefire is put in place, the less damage will be done. The situation in the region cannot be allowed to slide into an unknown abyss. The parties to the conflict, Israel in particular, should cease fire as soon as possible to prevent the situation from escalating and to avoid any spillover of the war. Second, the safety of civilians must be ensured. The red line of protecting civilians in armed conflicts must not be crossed at any time, and the indiscriminate use of force is unacceptable. The parties to the conflict must strictly abide by international law, resolutely avoid harming innocent civilians, refrain from attacking civilian facilities, and facilitate the evacuation of third country nationals. Third, we must stay committed to dialogue and negotiation. Communication and dialogue are the right paths to lasting peace. The current conflict has interrupted the negotiation process on the Iranian nuclear issue. The attacks on multiple Iranian nuclear facilities set a dangerous precedent and could have catastrophic consequences. We must not waver in the general direction of a political settlement to the Iranian nuclear issue, and we must persist in returning the Iranian nuclear issue to the track of a political solution through dialogue and negotiation. China welcomes the talk in Geneva among foreign ministers of UK, France, Germany, and the High Representative of EU for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, and the Foreign Minister of Iran. Fourth, we must bring together the efforts of the international community to promote peace. Without stability in the Middle East, peace in the world would be elusive. The Israel-Iran conflict has led to a sudden escalation of tension in the Middle East and has also had a serious impact on global security. Recently, 21 Arab and Islamic countries issued a joint statement of foreign ministers calling for a ceasefire, resuming talks on the Iranian nuclear issue, and maintaining lasting peace in the region, which China fully supports. The international community, especially major countries with special influence on the parties to the conflict, should make efforts to cool down the situation rather than the opposite. The Security Council, as the primary body responsible for maintaining international peace and security, should play a greater role in this regard. We support the Council in taking necessary actions in a timely fashion. China stands ready to continue to strengthen communication and coordination with all relevant parties, build synergies, uphold justice, and play a constructive role in restoring peace in the Middle East. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to thank Secretary General Guterres for his presence and thoughtful and compelling remarks. Secretary General, you spoke about a defining moment and our collective future, as well as collective responsibility. And we fully agree with you and your call to give peace a chance. And in that context, your appeal to end the fighting and return to negotiations. I'm also thankful to Undersecretary General DiCarlo for her complimentary briefing, as well as the briefing by Director General Grossi. We note in particular his view that diplomatic solution is within reach with necessary political will. Madam President, last Friday, the Council had an emergency session in the wake of Israel's military strikes, violating the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Iran in flagrant violation and contravention of the UN Charter and fundamental principles of international law. 1 week later, as a result of such irresponsible behavior, the situation has only exacerbated, with grave implications for regional and international peace and security. Pakistan strongly condemns the unjustified and illegitimate aggression by Israel. We stand in solidarity with the people of Iran. We unequivocally denounce the blatant attacks and military strikes carried out by Israel, which constitute a grave danger and a serious threat to the peace, security, and stability of the entire region and beyond, with serious implications. We offer our sincere condolences and sympathies to the brotherly people of Iran on the loss of life as a result of these unprovoked attacks. The ensuing humanitarian crisis and civilian toll on both sides is also deplorable. International humanitarian law must be complied by all sides. The attacks against nuclear facilities for peaceful purposes are deeply troubling. Such attacks contravene international law, the Charter of the UN, Statute of the IAEA, and relevant IAEA General Conference resolutions on the issue. It is the responsibility of the IAEA to clearly pronounce its legal position with regard to such attacks, as well as to report it to the Board of Governors and to the Security Council about the legal safeguards, safety and security implications of such attacks. The agency should fulfill that responsibility. Madam President, the latest crisis has aggravated the existing tensions in the region, arising from Israel's continuing ruthless assault on Gaza that has resulted in an unprecedented humanitarian catastrophe for the innocent Palestinians, as well as its recurring violations of international law in Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. The Security Council bears primary responsibility to immediately stop this wanton aggression and hold the aggressor accountable for its actions. The Security Council must fulfill its duty and affirm the following. First, categorical rejection and condemnation of Israel's attacks on the Islamic Republic of Iran since 13th of June and all actions that contravene international law and the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Second, play its due role to end the hostilities and promote de-escalation for achieving a comprehensive ceasefire before the situation spirals out of control and threatens the peace and stability of the entire region. Third, clear denunciation of the targeting of IAEA safeguarded nuclear facilities against the provisions of international law and the UN Charter as reflected in the UN Security Council resolutions, IAEA resolutions, and international humanitarian law, including the Geneva Conventions. The Security Council must implement its own resolution 487. Fourth, call for dialogue and diplomacy to promote a peaceful and lasting resolution of the crisis. Diplomacy must be given a chance. Madam President, regrettably, Israeli unlawful strikes against Iran came at the time of intense diplomatic engagement on Iran's nuclear issue. These illegal actions must not be allowed to scuttle that dialogue. Parties must swiftly return to the path of negotiations, which is the only viable means to reach a sustainable agreement regarding the Iranian nuclear program. We note the willingness expressed by the United States to keep the door for negotiations open. We also take note of the dialogue between the E3 and Iran. We hope that the diplomatic efforts and engagements will bear fruit. We reaffirm our long-standing position that all issues concerning Iran's nuclear program must be resolved peacefully through dialogue and diplomacy in accordance with the rights, international obligations, and responsibilities of all the parties concerned. At the same time, verification activities by the IAEA as the competent international technical organization mandated to implement respective safeguards obligations should continue unimpeded. The IAEA must continue its work in an impartial and apolitical manner to provide objective reporting and credible information regarding the issues under its purview. Madam President, this is a critical moment. The Security Council must fulfill its responsibility and facilitate peaceful resolution of disputes. Military means and coercion cannot bring about a lasting settlement. Dialogue and diplomacy, in full adherence to the principles of international law and the UN Charter, remain the only viable path to resolving this crisis. This Council must therefore unite in support of the Secretary General's call for end to fighting and return to negotiations and dialogue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Madam President, we are grateful to the Guianan presidency for the prompt response to the request from Russia, China, Pakistan, and Algeria to convene this meeting. We thank the UN Secretary General for his opening remarks, as well as the Undersecretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and the Director of the IAEA for their briefings. Madam President, exactly a week has elapsed since the start of the escalation of the Iran-Israeli conflict, which the Security Council discussed on the 13th of June. In this time, the world has been flooded with images depicting the night skies over Tel Aviv and Tehran and other cities lit up with explosions of tens and hundreds of rockets. The apocalyptic predictions have become a reality. People in both countries have been forced to take shelter in hideouts with each passing day. The list of civilian casualties on both sides lengthens. As a result of the closure of the airspace in the region, many third country civilians have become entrapped and they are striving to find a way home. The Iranian peaceful civilian nuclear facilities continue to be targeted, and this is liable to plunge us into a hitherto unseen nuclear catastrophe. The UN Security Council, the principal body for the maintenance of international peace and security, cannot shirk its responsibility and must provide an objective assessment of the situation and to devise an appropriate solution or decision. We cannot deny the obvious facts. It is indeed Israel which attacked Iran on the eve of the latest planned round of indirect talks between Washington and Tehran. Thereby, West Jerusalem not only demonstrated blatant disregard for the efforts that have been undertaken to seek a diplomatic solution to issues around the Iranian nuclear program, but also demonstrated contempt for its key ally, the United States, which up until recently had been declaring an intent to reach a compromise solution on this matter. It is worth recalling that the Iranian nuclear program is not a scroll secured by 7 seals, indiscernible to the international community. The nuclear facilities and installations in this country are under the safeguards of the IAEA and are continuously subject to scrupulous verification by agency inspectors. Not a single of the member states of this body is under more stringent oversight and scrutiny. Iran has been strictly complying with its obligations under the NPT and the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. The Secretariat of the agency's reports have no mention whatsoever about the presence of proliferation risks. So it turns out that Israel has disregarded the assessments of the Specialized International Agency, having on its own authority appointed itself a judge, single-handedly deciding to carry out strikes against a sovereign country with no regard for the UN Charter and international law. Just recently, in the Middle East, a tragic precedent occurred of an invasion into a state under the pretext of alleged presence there of WMDs, which subsequently failed to materialize. It's a pity that the United States, which demonstrated to the entire world this discredited example in 2003, which generated suffering for millions of people, does not wish to learn from its own mistakes. Today, the U.S., yet again, together with the U.K., France, and Germany, is attempting to persuade all parties to believe the groundless fabrications about plans allegedly harbored by Tehran to gain possession of nuclear weapons. Nor can we forget the fact that the attack on Iran was carried out at the time when the entire world observed with horror the ongoing man-made disaster which was unfolding in Gaza and continues to unfold in Gaza, and was condemned the ongoing humanitarian blockade of the Strip and was awaiting the high-level conference in support of the two-state formula under the aegis of the United Nations in accordance with General Assembly resolutions. Instead of reverting back to the sole possible negotiated peaceful settlement in Palestine, Israeli military political leadership raised the stakes and expanded the geography of the conflict in the region. Perhaps the Western Jerusalem's calculations also are to have the new military misadventure detract the international community's attention away from the crimes perpetrated by Tzahal in Gaza and the West Bank. We have seen highly perilous attempts to drag third countries into this confrontation, and this, as was rightly noted by the Secretary General, would have colossal consequences, not just for the stakeholders and the parties engaged, but for the entire region and international peace and security as a whole. We concur with Mr. Guterres' position about the need to avoid internationalization of the conflict. Madam President, the present escalation around Iran did not start yesterday. Having attacked the country, Israel first received a direct pass from a host of Western states. The rhetoric uttered by British, French, and German diplomats in the lofty chambers of the UN Security Council and the IAEA Board of Governors are equally dangerous, just as dangerous as the deadliest weaponry, the blatant blackmail of the leadership of the agency in order to compel it to draft a vague so-called comprehensive assessment on the Iranian nuclear program, pushing through biased anti-Iranian resolutions at the IAEA Board of Governors. All of this made those countries effectively complicit in the Israeli aggression. Let's recall that this specific IAEA report was one of the justifications used by Israeli leadership for the attack on Iraq. What is telling in this connection is a cynical statement from the German Chancellor, Mr. Merz, about, and I quote, Israel doing the dirty work for us. End of quote. The fact that the launch buttons are being pressed by West Jerusalem does not absolve Washington, London, Paris, and Berlin from responsibility for what is taking place. Russia views the ongoing intense Israeli attacks targeting civilian objects in Iran as completely unacceptable and unlawful under international law. As a result of these reckless actions, unacceptable threats are being posed to international peace and security. Nuclear facilities cannot be targeted by strikes. We demand that West Jerusalem immediately cease attacks and raids on Iran, first and foremost the nuclear facilities which are under the protection of the IAEA. We expect that the agency leadership will draft in short order a detailed written report and response to the reports for consideration of the IAEA Board of Governors and the Security Council with the frank assessments of the damage sustained by Iran's nuclear and energy facilities, as well as the safeguards application in that country, including in the context of the presence of inspectors there, inspectors whose lives were under imminent threat. We take note of the clear Iranian statements about its steadfast commitment to obligations under the NPT and the willingness to resume contact with Washington to forge possible solutions that dispel all baseless suspicions and biases vis-à-vis Tehran's nuclear program under the condition that Israeli attacks cease. We support this position. We share the Secretary General's call for an immediate de-escalation resulting in a ceasefire. We firmly believe that a resolution can be provided for in a sustainable way only through diplomacy and negotiations. The goals of nuclear nonproliferation, whose cornerstone is the NPT, cannot and must not be attained through aggression at the cost of innocent lives. We believe that solutions whereby Iran's right to peaceful nuclear activity and Israel's unconditional safety and security will simultaneously be upheld are feasible and attainable. We have conveyed these options to our U.S. and Israeli colleagues as well as Iranian partners. We stand ready to provide them with the necessary assistance in seeking solutions that are acceptable to all. For now, we still have an opportunity to avoid another devastating war that would have unpredictable repercussions for the entire region and world. We stand ready to seek relevant solutions and decisions at the UN Security Council to engage constructively with all parties who genuinely advocate diplomacy and dialogue. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I wish to express our appreciation to you for convening this urgent meeting, the second within a week, which underscores the seriousness of the situation before us. I thank the Secretary General for his remark and his personal engagement toward peace and stability in the region. And we echo your call for dialogue and for ending the fighting. I also thank USG DiCarlo and Director General Grossi for their briefings. Madam President, Israel's attack against Iran is an unprovoked and unjustified act. It constitutes a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations. This is an attack on nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguard. If these safeguards
I'm in love with the crunch and the cream and the cone. I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in love.
Unwrap the perfect cornetto.
Step into a future where technology and innovation redefine everyday living. Dolan's Premaline No Frost refrigerator range. With its Duo Frost technology, independent cooling system keeps food fresh for longer, prevents odor mixing, and ensures even cooling with consistent temperatures. Every innovation, every feature, every detail, engineered for a better tomorrow. Dolan's Premaline, designed for better.
क्रंची पिस्ता और बादाम से मिला पहले से भी ज्यादा क्रीमी मजा। अब एक नए पैक में तो मौका जो भी हो
ये वास्तव तो बनती है।
सेलेनोर समर गाला से डिस्काउंट इतना हैवी 2300 की मंथली ऑफर अब 1500 में मिले। सेलेनोर के अलावा कौन दे सकता है ऐसी डील? क्रंची पिस्ता और बादाम से मिला पहले से भी ज्यादा क्रीमी मजा। अब एक नए पैक में तो मौका जो भी हो
ये वास्तव तो बनती है।
नेशनल रेसिपी मिक्सेस के नए जायके घर ले आइए। तो फिर अब रोजाना अलग अलग खाने बनाने के बारे में क्या ख्याल है?
सेलेनोर समर गाला से डिस्काउंट इतना हैवी 2300 की मंथली ऑफर अब 1500 में मिले। सेलेनोर के अलावा कौन दे सकता है ऐसी डील?
तो फिर अब रोजाना अलग अलग खाने बनाने के बारे में क्या ख्याल है?
क्रंची पिस्ता और बादाम से मिला पहले से भी ज्यादा क्रीमी मजा। अब एक नए पैक में